All right, guys, we are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy Show. I am your host. I am Keith Shillan. I'm a writer for SureDog.com and the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. This is airing on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and SureDog Radio Network. I am joined by the senior editor of SureDog.com. He, of course, is the great Benjamin Duffy. Ben, we just had an incredible, crazy madness card. How you doing, man? I needed like an exhale. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I could definitely stand an exhale myself. You know what? A 14-fight card that went by pretty damn quick, and a lot of the fights offered us either wild stuff happening in the cage or wild stuff happening afterwards outside of it is what I'm getting the impression now. So plenty to dive into.
Yeah, so we're recording this immediately after the event. The event ended about 30 minutes or so ago. And the reason why we have a 30-minute gap is I had to watch the post-fight to see what happened with Covington. There was things that happened with Kamaru Usman. There was a thing that happened during the interview with Megan O'Leary. We'll get to all that in a second. We're talking about UFC Vegas 11, UFC on ESPN Plus. I don't know the number.
39 or something, UFC Fight Night 178, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, can we just get rid of it? I know we say this every week. Can we just call it all right, so this is UFC Fight Night Covington versus Woodley. Let's get to the housekeeping real quick. In the housekeeping, we had 3 canceled bouts, which is extremely low for what we've been having. I'll go through them real quick. The first one was Miguel Baeza was supposed to fight Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall withdrew. I don't know if it was injury, just as withdrew. He was replaced by UFC newcomer Jeremiah Wells. Right before that fight was going to take place, Baeza was not cleared to fight, so that fight was completely canceled. The other fight that was canceled was Mirsad Bektik was supposed to face Eduardo Gregori. Instead, Mirsad Bektik faced off with Damian Martin because of that. Damian Jackson, who took the fight on 3 days' notice, his return to the UFC. So that's what we had. Let's get right into it, man. Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley. It's like a fight we've been talking about for years. It finally went down. It was not a close fight. Colby Covington dominated pretty much every second of this fight. He won by 5th round stoppage, a TKO, technically in the books, when Kamaru Usman yelled out in pain from apparent rib or midsection, some kind of body injury. We don't know the severity of it. We hope he is okay. I want to take this fight and I want to break it into sections. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the pre-stuff of the last couple years with Colby and Tyron. Then I want to talk about the actual fight, where we go with Colby, where we go with Tyron. All right, in those 4 sections. All right.
Sure.
Because there's a lot, and there's a lot to talk about this entire event. It was craziness. So a lot of people, like the UFC was doing this, like bad blood, calling it one of the best rivalries ever. How do you feel about this rivalry? When you think back 10 years from now, how would you rank this rivalry, or what's just your overall thought of this rivalry?
It's definitely a hot rivalry. I mean, these guys had some history together, obviously had trained together. The dislike for one another was absolutely real. As far as it being a clash of political and cultural spheres, I think that's a little overstated. I think that's probably Woodley saw it more that way than Covington did. Because, I mean, Woodley has kind of embraced the political stances and causes that he has for a long time, you know, whether in the public eye or out of it. It's just part of who he is and where he comes from and what he believes in. With Covington, I mean, 5 years ago, Covington was just another up-and-coming welterweight, and he embraced this as a way to kind of propel himself into stardom, and it worked. And I'm not saying he doesn't actually hold these views. He might, for all I know, but there was a turning point. You know, he beat Damian Maia, called the Brazil crowd a bunch of filthy animals. They threw shit into the cage and got mad. And he was like, and the light went off. And it went off for him. And once he embraced it, it went off for the UFC. But I think it got under Woodley's skin more than it did Covington's. Like,
Sure.
To Covington,
Absolutely.
this is show business. This is hyping up the fight.
Absolutely.
And to Woodley, I think it actually bothered him.
Yeah.
I don't think that made any difference in the cage.
Sure.
Woodley was going to lose, even if they were like best friends and going to go out to Denny's afterwards. But yeah, good rivalry. Had some legitimate drama and like human interest going on, but not the greatest of all time or anything.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Definitely not the greatest rivalry in MMA and UFC. Probably not even the greatest rivalry in the UFC welterweight division. There's so many things, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this. So this is what I'll say. I'm just going to throw a blanket over the whole Donald Trump versus Black Lives Matter. Like, we're just going to leave that out because everybody has an opinion, and this is not a political talk show. I honestly, I got to give you credit. We do this show, and I don't even know your political stance on pretty much anything. And that's actually a good, shows a sign of professionalism as a journalist that if people don't know where you stand politically, you did a good job. Then that's what they say about teachers. If your students know your political beliefs, then you probably are a terrible teacher. So I credit you for that. I'm a police officer, so I think people could figure out where I stand on this. But let's leave that out. Make up your own mind. But there's, they had the former teammates and, Woodley saying you were nobody. Covington be I used to beat you up at the gym. Woodley doing he has to talk this way. He has to do this Donald Trump over the top WF wrestler type gimmick to get noticed. And I'm like, yeah, he did. And it worked because either you absolutely hate Colby Covington or you absolutely love him. No one's other than maybe Marcel Dorff, nobody has a just middle of the road, I like watching him fight and that's it. Or I don't like watching him, you have a strong opinion on him and that's a good thing. Now, I've been saying this for a while. I feel like this fight happened a year too late. I felt like the UFC dropped the ball on it. The tension in America has probably never been high. Well, I mean, Civil War and stuff, but there's never been higher in my lifetime with what these two guys kind of sides they take on. So that kind of boiled up the rivalry, but the actual competitive nature of it, very few people were taking Tyron Woodley. There was no belt on the line. It's not a pay-per-view. So I really feel like if Usman never came in, if they didn't give that match to Usman and it was Colby Covington, I feel like this would have been a big pay-per-view success. You would have had a countdown show. You would have had it embedded. You would have had we didn't even have a press conference. We had this weird press conference where the two main guys weren't there. Then you had Tyron Woodley basically refusing to answer questions on the fight. Obviously, there's no crowd. It really, to me, that really drained down this rivalry. Agree or disagree?
I would go a step further and say this came 2 years too late. And the UFC knew it. That's why they were so mad when he went in for that sinus surgery 2 years ago in late 2018 when they stripped him of the interim belt after 3 months. And he got super mad, because he thought he was in tight with the UFC because his star had risen so quickly. But it was right after he beat RDA for the interim title because Woodley was out injured, which, nothing new there.
Sure.
One of the biggest complaints about him was that he was injury prone. And he was ready to go that fall, and Covington wasn't because he went to have the nasal surgery. If they'd made that fight then, that would have been its kind of peak of freshness promotionally because, this was a pretty divided country this time 2 years ago as well, but competitively as well. I might have slightly favored Covington even at the time 2 years ago, but all the things that made Woodley dangerous and the things they were still trying to talk up this time, he has the huge right hand, he can knock anybody out with one shot. It was more of a threat 2 years ago. So I would say this fight would have been better 2 years ago. Even 1 year ago would have been better.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually agree. 2 years ago is where it's right. I didn't even realize that the beat in RDA was that long ago. I just assumed it was about a year ago. So, yeah, you're right. 2 years ago is when they missed out. The other thing that happened with this is you had the American top team angle, and for the most part, we've kind of learned that Tyron Woodley has that American top team, but he's mostly a Rufus-Port guy at this point, or really just a student of Dean Thomas.
He's a Dean Thomas guy,
yeah. While Colby Covington has now moved along from American top team to MMA Masters there in Miami, but 2 years ago, you had Colby Covington still an American top team. There was people who were upset about him being an American top team. Then you would have still had the Tyron Woodley connection. You'd have Dean Thomas, an American top team guy, cornering Tyron Woodley. Other American top team guys cornering.
It would have been Mike Brown. It would have been Mike Brown at the time, kind of their main guy. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't reach the Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, John Jones, Daniel Cormier, that level, but. It might have been. It really might have been if that. And one thing you said you would have favored Colby Covington. You would have been in the minority. I've actually been on record saying for a long time, I liked Colby Covington in that matchup. But 2 years ago, Colby Covington was a massive favorite tonight. I don't know what the lines were, but I think it was about -300. I don't think Tyron Woodley would have been that big of a favorite, but he would have been pretty close. He would have been a significant favorite heading into that fight. And 2 years later, it's been completely flipped on its head.
Well, it's been completely flipped because Woodley has looked so bad, and then Covington, even in a loss, has looked comparatively good. But no, I agree. I thought he was underrated at the time. He's always been underrated. He was underrated at first just because nobody could remember who the hell he was. He was just another kind of grindy wrestler. And then they underrated him because they hated him so bad they wanted him to lose. Know?
How many people were taking RDA to beat him just because of the hatred for Colby Covington. I mean, there was people in the media world who still picked Tyron Woodley heading into this matchup lost 10 rounds in a row decisively. Mm-hmm. 5 of those rounds was to Kamaru Usman. Colby Covington did he got stopped at the end, but he was doing extremely well against Kamaru. Now I know I'm not saying, A beats B beats C. I'm not saying I'm not doing MMA math or any of that, but I'm just using it as a point. And there was still some people who just because of their hatred for Colby Covington, and I can't speak for them. Maybe they saw something. I'm just guessing that they just didn't want to pick Colby Covington. It was like a pride thing. So let's talk about the actual fight. Despite what you think about Colby Covington, the guy's a brilliant fighter. I mean, his stand-up has been improving. He has always had a great game plan. Obviously, suffocating wrestler. His performance tonight was absolute. It was a masterpiece. He won in such a huge margin in strikes. I don't know what the total strikes were, but the output in the beginning was actually low for him. And he still outstruck Tyron Woodley by 40 strikes in the first round. I think that was because he respected Tyron's power. Still to this, even though we haven't seen it, it's been forever since he flattened someone with that right hand. I thought Colby still respected his power, which is why I thought it was brilliant that he got Woodley to overextend for a second to set up that takedown, to have a long period in the first round where they were wrestling to build up the lactic acid in Tyron Woodley's arm. We talked about it in the past about Tyron Woodley being that at this point he's really just a pull right hand guy, and if he can pull you into his right hand, he has a shot. But every fight that goes by, it seems like that window of landing it is getting smaller and smaller. And if Colby could turn this into a wrestling match and get that lactic acid build up and get him more tired, well, you just close the window even smaller. I thought that was brilliant. What did you think, especially in the very beginning of Colby's strategy?
Brilliant. All the reasons you said. He knew going in that Woodley had one avenue to victory. Everyone knew that Woodley had one avenue to victory. If they stayed on the feet, Colby is a high volume, medium low power guy with pretty solid defensive fundamentals at this point. So he's probably just going to win a so-so kickboxing match. If they engage in the wrestling, despite the differences in their credentials, and their credentials are pretty comparable, but just Covington, especially at this point in their careers, is a much better MMA wrestler. So it was choose your poison. And the one way that Woodley had to win was to just flatten him with a single huge right hand and either knock him out or compromise him badly enough that he could jump on and finish with something else. Covington spent the first round making sure that did not happen. I mean, yeah, he threw low volume for him, was relatively buttoned up, because he does, he does have occasional lapses on the feet, and just ducked under one of Woodley's right hands, brought him to the mat, and that psychologically is a big thing. The booth said that Woodley had been gun shy recently. That doesn't begin to cover it. He had always been a low volume striker, but he threw enough volume to win a lot of fights. He threw enough volume to win the UFC welterweight title and defend it 4 times. He went from low volume to no volume. In the Burns fight, he did not pull the trigger at all after the first round.
That's
Same
right.
thing in this fight.
Same thing in the Usman fight. We talk about him and his pulled right hand, and it's like, does he even have that anymore? Because it hasn't been a threat to those 3 guys. And in this fight, the biggest threat to Colby Covington was probably the 10-finger guillotine, which was never even close. But that was the only time you're like, whoop, maybe he has something here. And then Colby Covington would either take him down or get past the hip, and he wouldn't be threatened there. The other thing that I really liked that Colby was doing was that flying knee to close the distance. What I liked about it is Tyron Woodley was backing up to the cage, and why I liked the flying knee as an offensive move for Colby was because Tyron can't back up now. So you can throw that flying knee, because usually what happens when someone throws a flying knee? You either duck down and go into it, or you just back away from it. And if he's at the cage, he can't back away from it. I think that was pretty brilliant. And
probably a good thing. Probably knowing his capacity for game planning, probably something that he drilled, knowing that Woodley, especially at this point in his career, intentionally backs himself into the cage.
Yeah, and where he was throwing it, he wasn't like hunting for the head. He was throwing it towards the body. But what to me, what's even more brilliant, because if either he lands in the body, Tyron ducks him, which is a natural reaction, and you hit the head, or and then the other one we talked about how he couldn't back up. So you either got to hit the body or hit the head. And it worked out really well. Like, he landed it over and over again. He didn't land a flying knee knockout. Is there anything else to talk about through rounds 2 through 5? Because it was pretty much like rinse and repeat. Like, we talked about just what happened in the first round, but
it was rinse and repeat. The only thing I'd say is, for the first 3 rounds, Covington unambiguously won every round. There's no question. He won basically every minute of every round. But for the first 3 rounds, Woodley avoided taking a whole lot of damage. He was already hopelessly behind when the 4th round started, but he wasn't dead. If he had anything left in the tank, if he was going to make any adjustments, they were all there. It wasn't like after 3 rounds of Whitaker versus Romero where both guys looked like they've been run over by a truck. So all I'd say is he did a good job of kind of avoiding major damage. When Covington got him down, he did a good job of denying him positional advances, denying him really damaging ground and pound. So they both did just enough for Covington to win the first 3 rounds. Then he started really rolling downhill. The takedown started to come easier. He was able to put more damage on him. I'm surprised after that eye injury that Woodley wanted back into the fight. It's to his credit that he did. So that's it.
Yeah, I was watching that and I was like, oh no, is this going to end the fight? Then the 4th round came, and that's when Colby really put it on Tyron. The total strikes of that round was 113-2. That is like, I don't know what the record is for a round, but that's got to be close to. Yeah, it's got to be up there in the top 10 or something. The disparity between the strikes. It's been 15 rounds in a row that Tyron Woodley has lost. I kept tweeting it after every round because it's just some thing that when you think of someone like Tyron Woodley, one of the best welterweights of all time, former champion, just seems strange for when we see guys lose it. They usually kind of go out in the shield, they get knocked out, something like that. But to see a guy just picked apart round over round and looking helpless, I don't remember the last time we saw a top guy like that where they just look helpless. They usually just get knocked out.
Yeah, it's a lot of what RDA has looked like, only worse because Woodley was a champ for longer, and it's been just like a more precipitous decline. But it's the same kind of thing where a dominant guy is suddenly just getting dominated.
Yeah, let's talk about the post fight. I don't want to spend too much time because there's a lot of political nonsense that I don't want to get into. But it starts with Megan O'Leary having an interview with Colby Covington while Karen Bryant, Rashad Evans, and Kamaru Usman is doing that. I don't know what they call it, the panel, like the what do you call it? Yeah, the panel. And they cut to Megan O'Leary interviewing Colby Covington. He takes one or two questions. He does his whole, I want Street Jesus. I want Marty Fake Newsman. The same thing we keep hearing anyways. I want my belt back. And then he says, oh, my God, I'm getting a call from the president right now. They put it on speaker, and you hear some, some assistant or something say, hold for the president. And Donald Trump, you hear it right on the ESPN broadcast. So, regardless how you feel about Donald Trump, again, we're not going to go on that. It still boggles my mind to see where this sport is right now, because there was a time where politicians, and it wasn't that long ago, where politicians was trying to ban the sport from being on TV, and now we have the top politician in America, possibly the world, calling the champion 10 minutes after he's done. We don't see that in the major sports. You don't see LeBron James getting a phone call when he wins the NBA Finals, or Tom Brady getting I know they do get a phone, but you don't cut into Fox Super Bowl coverage because Tom Brady's getting a call from the president. Am I just thinking it's just me that's it's so weird? Is this an arrive? Have we arrived? Or is it just me overreacting?
Well, it's a mixture of, the sport arriving, but also the sphere of politics is moving and shifting. We have a president who engages with the public through social media in a way none other ever has. So where, the winning Super Bowl team or NBA Finals team gets an invitation to the White House, now the winner of a Fight Night main event just gets a call directly. But he was at a campaign event last week, so
sure.
They had a photo op barely a week ago. So I don't know if this is a permanent crossover. Who knows what the crossover will look like when we're talking about a different fighter and potentially a different president. But for now, this really kind of puts dead to the whole, keep politics out of sports thing, because politics is entering into sports forcibly, and it's not the media making it happen.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. First of all, I said LeBron James. I don't think LeBron James would ever get a call from Donald Trump. I don't know if that that would happen. And I also don't think if Joe Biden wins the presidency, I don't expect him to call Kamaru Usman after a championship, or Israel Adesanya or somebody. The other thing that happened was the usual back and forth between Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman. You faked the nut injury. I broke your face. This and that. I was winning the fight of bad stoppage. Blah blah blah. Colby said something about dragon energy. I don't know what it was. Two things stood out, and I'm gonna. This is when we get political, but we're gonna move on real quick because it's gonna, depending on which side you stand on, might bother you, and which is why I think they went too far. Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman made this comment about there's something on your face, and it was like a sexual innuendo about you were just talking to the president, and all right guys, we're adults. He's basically saying you got Donald Trump's jizz on your face. You're on ESPN, man. That's the president. Regardless if you don't want to vote for him, come on guys. That's the president of the United States. And you're on ESPN. Let's not do that. And then Colby Covington responds about you don't get any respect from your president or whatever. Where's your tribe? And are they throwing up smoke signals for you? Which is, I don't throw the R word racist around a lot. I'm not throwing it around here because I don't. But it's not it's not. I don't think it's racist, but it's not. It might be. You know what I mean? So I don't like that either. I thought they both were extremely unprofessional. Where we just had this high point where a president calls in the middle of the broadcast, we just have two guys completely going opposite way. I know you didn't get to watch it, but and I expect you to comment on something controversial without actually seeing it in context. But do you have any thoughts on what we're talking about?
I mean, definitely not a good look that Covington would make remarks about another American's quote unquote people, you know. I mean, as far as the making that tasteless comment about the president, I agree with a certain amount of respect and deference for the office of the president, but I mean, and here you will probably see a small glimpse into my own political leanings, but the current occupant of that office has repeatedly shown that anything is fair game. Like some of the comments that he's made about other people, like while president or while running for president, you know, whether making fun of their disabilities or their accents or, you know, theoretical plastic surgery that they've had. Nothing's too tasteless. You know, he is a president who's come from years and years of running a reality show and kind of being a real estate mogul in New York, and he's just carried that over. It's a different presidency, you know, different rules. Neither of them are especially savory or tasteful, but it's just what we've got right now.
Yeah, and I know I can speak for us. We're not trying to convince anybody to vote this way, vote that way. We're definitely not trying to do that. And if you think we are, then you're not listening, because we are trying to tiptoe this line as much as possible. But we are living in. We can all agree, whether you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're an independent, we are living in some weird times right now. And Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman is helping it seem even weirder. Let's talk about where we go from this. Let's start with Colby Covington. Obviously, Kamaru Usman is going to fight Gilbert Burns. Colby Covington's calling for the winner of that matchup, particularly Kamaru Usman. He also threw out Jorge Masvidal. I really think that's the fight to make. Dana White said on the post-fight press conference that he wants to make that matchup. He wants to make Colby versus Jorge Masvidal, which is surprising considering there was the rumors that they were working on the rematch with Nate Diaz, which I know working with the Diaz brothers can always be difficult. Getting them to the table is always difficult. I think they weren't anticipating the fan reaction because I didn't see a lot of positive to that.
No.
So that's the fight I would do. I think you've kind of blew it with Tyron Woodley. I thought you were a little too late. You might even be a little too late on the Jorge Masvidal, but like if you don't do it now, you're going to lose some steam. So I think Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal, former best friends, all that is the match to go. What do you agree with me, or are you seeing something else?
If I were Covington, I would put my foot down and say I want the winner of Burns versus Usman. You know, like there's nothing else for me, because anything else for him competitively is a step back. If making Masvidal versus Covington means that we don't have to deal with Masvidal versus Diaz too, which just doesn't make any sense for either guy, then give that to me. I mean, I don't think it would be terribly competitive. I don't see Masvidal having any real plausible avenues to victory there, but it'd be a paycheck for both guys. Certainly it's a fight that would hype itself up. So if the UFC wants to make that, see if they can secure a nice payday for themselves and for both of those fighters, that's great. But that's talking from like the fan or observer perspective or from the UFC's perspective. If I'm Covington, I'm putting my foot down for that title shot. He has earned it. And anything else,
sure,
really, it's out of the goodness of his heart. Like, he's just been completely dominant against everyone but the champ.
Yeah. So one thing me and John Franklin used to do is we'd come up with a match and we'd say, who says no? Like, which side says no? And I don't think Covington would say no. I think it'd be Masvidal, because the reason why I say the Masvidal fight is the one should happen, I think it's for two reasons. One, I still think Jorge Masvidal, that's a bigger fight for Colby Covington. I think it's more marketable. I mean, Jorge Masvidal is still one of the biggest stars in the sport today. And two, like you already said, I agree with you. I think that's a terrible stylistic matchup for Jorge Masvidal. I think that's a very easy. I don't want to say easy. It's never easy against Jorge Masvidal, but like Colby Covington would be a pretty significant favorite in my opinion, and I think he wins it fairly easily. So I think that's why he should do it. I know some people are throwing out Leon Edwards. Poor Leon. He's not going to fight anybody. Like, no one's going to fight him. Let's go with Tyron Woodley. First of all, like we already talked about, he's lost 15 fights in a row. He looks shot.
15
rounds.
Sorry,
15 rounds.
It feels like 15 fights in a row, but I'm with you there. But.
It does. On the post-fight show, both Rashad Evans and Kamaru Usman throughout the retirement talked about maybe he really should hang it up. I wouldn't mind seeing Tyron Woodley retire. I'm assuming you probably feel the same way.
I'm with you there as well. Competitively, there isn't much that makes sense for him other than taking a step all the way outside of the top 10 for his next opponent. And if you're Woodley and you're 38 years old and you've been at the heights of this sport, like, why would you want to fight Jeff Neal? Why would you want to fight like Hamzat Chimaev or somebody and either get a win that does you really no good but one more paycheck, or just get another loss piled on? I don't know how badly he needs money. I don't know what the competitive fire feels like to him. I don't know how bad he got hurt tonight. But as an outside observer, again, I wouldn't mind him stepping away and still going down as one of the best welterweights of his generation.
Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately the best move would be to retire. I mean, he has this rap career, which I don't know how well he does there, but he has had some success acting. Like, he's done some things acting. Maybe he goes that route. I mean, think about guys like Randy Couture. People used to laugh about Randy Couture becoming an actor, and he's been pretty successful with it. And Oleg Taktarov has been like stars in movie. And you guys who are newer fans, go look up who Oleg Taktarov is. Yeah, I mean, there's really, if he does stick around fighting, which is, I would probably put it about 50-50. There's two avenues, and it's kind of always that avenue when you see a guy declining. You either have the avenue of, okay, put him against other names who are kind of in the same predicament, like guys who are way past their prime, not going to be title challengers anymore, but they had it one time, was at the same level. So you think about a rematch against Robbie Lawler, which is something they tried recently doing. Him and Donald Cerrone have never faced each other. That could be an option. Rematch with Carlos Condit. Like, those are the guys who have names. Or you do be really cruel to him and you go, okay, he's still a name. He just headlined a UFC. He's actually headlined, like, I don't know how many his fights in a row has been headlined. 6-7 fights in a row has been headlines or whatever. Let's use him to build that welterweight that has budding stars. So if you want to do that route, well, all right, be cruel to him and put him against Jeff Neal and let Jeff Neal smash him and build his name. I'm okay with either route. If you had to pick one of those, would you rather see him fighting the legacy fights where it really doesn't matter, but it's a co-main event on a fight night, or would you rather see someone build off of him?
I guess I'd rather see somebody build off of him, just because even at his best, he's not always a lot of fun to watch. I mean, like I said, even when he was the welterweight champ of the world, he was a low output guy, and just the fights were either defined by his opponent's overabundance of respect for him, like the second Thompson fight, or just nothing happened until he blasted a dude out of his shoes. Why would I want to see that when the stakes are lower?
Sure, I agree. So ultimately, before we have to move on, and there's still a lot to talk about. That's why we have to move on. Ultimately, if I was Tyron Woodley's friend or something, he asked me advice, I would say retire. That's what you do, or would you say keep fighting?
If I was a friend, I'd say retire.
Okay, all right. Moving on, co-main event, we had Donald Cerrone versus Nico Price. This became a majority draw. One of the judges gave the fight 29-27 for Cerrone. The other two judges scored it 28-28. I scored it 28-28. I gave a 9-9 round in the first because Nico Price had a point taken off of him for 2 eye pokes. I went 10-9 Price in the second, and I gave Cerrone the third round 10-9. How did you score it, my man?
I scored it exactly the same as you. So 28-28 draw. And Nico Price has nobody to blame but himself for this. This should have been a unanimous decision for him where he won the first round and the second round and lost the third round. Because the thing is, he didn't win because of the eye pokes. He won, or he performed as he did in spite of the eye pokes. They didn't phase Cerrone that badly, but I mean, once you do 2 in a round and you've already been warned multiple times, it was a perfectly justifiable point deduction. So, I mean, they didn't help him win the fight, and he would have won if he hadn't just kept poking Cerrone in the eye. It's just ridiculous. It's the most Nico Price thing ever.
Everything is weird with Nico Price. There was another time late in the fight, I don't remember if it was the second or third, but they both poked each other in the eyes. And I was thinking to myself, that was the first time Cerrone poked Nico, but it was the third time Nico. While it was extremely unlikely to happen, like, I would have been okay with him actually deducting another point from Nico because, like, hey, that's one strike on him. That's your third strike. That said, minus the eye pokes, I thought it was actually a pretty good showing for, like, I thought Nico Price showed levels to his game that he didn't have before. And what stood out to me about him is that, like, I thought he showed maturity because he had a high output, but it was controlled for once. Mm-hmm. It was same in the Luque fight, the last one. Like, it was very controlled. The other thing I liked about Nico is you could tell he studied Cerrone because the things we talk about Donald Cerrone, like what's the two things that everyone always says about Donald Cerrone? Slow starter, weak to the body. What did Nico Price do? He came out like a bat out of hell in the first round, wasn't able to stop him then, kind of controlled himself, gassed out a little bit, and then kind of slowly worked his, gets the second win, and all he kept doing was throwing kicks to the body. So I thought it was a pretty good show. As far as Cerrone, maybe Cerrone needs to do some sparring in the back so he doesn't have a slow start anymore. He still shows skill, but this is just, to me, as a guy who's clearly on the decline. Not one of these guys that just fell off the cliff, but it's that he's slowly rolling down the hill, or he's on the escalator down, like slowly.
Well, I mean, think of this. I don't mean this as an insult, because I think Nico Price is awesome. He is, like, his fights are appointment viewing, but think of Price, think of his limitations, think of his defensive lapses, think of the holes in his game, and think of how badly Donald Cerrone would have taken this man to the woodshed just 3 years ago.
Yeah. When he took him down, like, so one thing that stood out to me was that output of Cerrone was much lower than Nico Price. And other than that first round, the slow start, like, Donald Cerrone's never been known as a guy who's been a low output guy, and that's usually a sign of decline. Like, that's something that people don't talk about enough in declining fighters. They always talk about the chin that goes away, the cardio goes away. I mean, Tyron Woodley's gone on record talking about, well, the reason why I work slow is because my cardio is declining. I kind of have to fight slower. I think we saw that with Cerrone, and I think, like, that's why he wasn't able to. I thought he would have a big advantage on the ground in the wrestling. He wasn't able to capitalize it because that tires you out.
Yep.
So, I mean, when Nico was going to the legs and going to the body, he was throwing 5-6 kicks for every, like, one strike by Cerrone. And, like, it's not going to get better. Like, that's what we're going to continue to see from Cerrone. And it's going to get worse. Like, he's going to throw less strikes next fight.
He is. I mean, he's definitely to the point where, I mean, we're not talking about it the same way we are about Woodley, but he is at the point where he kind of has to choose: do I take legacy fights? Do I, just take fights where younger contenders are kind of, put over on my name? It's not solely his decision. It's also his promoter's decision and his management, but he's at that same juncture.
Yeah, I actually don't hate if they put Cerrone versus Woodley. The two guys have been in the same division for, I know Cerrone's bounced around, but, they've been in the division long enough, two guys that never face each other. So I'm going to pull back the curtain on this show. The only pre-stuff we do together is I message you and say, hey, let's matchmake 4 or 5 guys what we want to talk about matchmaking. That's it. That's our whole, like, pre-show.
Yep.
I almost message you about Cerrone, like, let's do Cerrone and Price, and I go, well, what are you talking about? Like, they're going to fight whoever. They will fight, yep. Like, next week there's an opening, Donald Cerrone will volunteer, or Nico Price, like, so why bother? Like, they will fight anybody. Let's move on. Man. Hamzat Chimaev versus Gerald Meerschaert. This fight was 17 seconds long. Chimaev knocked out Gerald Meerschaert with the first punch he threw, knocked him out cold. Shimaev will not win Fighter of the Year simply because he's not going to get a major title or something like that. He won't crack into the top 5. But he's the no-brainer breakthrough Fighter of the Year, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
like
regardless of what happens between now and the end of the year, even if Maia chokes him out in a couple weeks, he's still the breakthrough Fighter of the Year.
Yeah, so I mean, think about it. People are talking about a guy who's 3-0 in the UFC, hasn't faced a ranked fighter, and people are calling for him to fight Conor McGregor. Like, a lot. Like, a lot of people are calling for that. Everyone, I saw someone message me today and said, I expect Colby Covington, right after this, I think Covington and Shimaev is going to fight for, like, the title eliminator fight. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. But just to mention that is crazy. This guy's 3-0 in the UFC. I did not check the stats. This is strictly off a Jordan Breen tweet. But apparently he has 98 significant strikes to 1 in that. I don't know how true that is, but it's pretty close. That is like Alexander Karelin type stat. 98 to 1 the significant strikes. The only thing you can really take away from this, in my opinion, was we kept talking about the guy with takedowns and mauling like Habib, and now he's knocking guys out with blazing fast right hand.
And that's part of, I think, what all the hype is about. There are several fighters who have come into the UFC this year with undefeated records and have won more than one fight, and none of them are getting the same kind of shine as him. And I think that's partly it, that because he, has the name and he has like the foreguard, like, and beard, they assume that he must have the Dagestani level of wrestling. And then on top of that, just this freakish, quick twitch, stand up. That'll remain to be seen. What he did tonight was he beat his first UFC level fighter.
Sure. Yeah, that's what I was literally looking up. I want to remember who he fought. So his 3 fights were against John Phillips, Reese McKee, and Gerald Meerschaert. These aren't world beaters. This isn't John Jones he beat. That said,
no,
like there's something in these beatings. Like this shows that elite guy, what an elite guy should do to these levels. Like that's what he's doing. Like he looks like a top 10 talent to me. Like right now.
He looks like it by the eyeball test. Obviously, I would say he has. Well, I mean, if he does end up facing Damian Maia in a couple of weeks, that is at least a top 15 guy even now. So that'll be one more hurdle passed. And honestly, it might be the top 10 or 15 level fighter that's the most favorable style matchup for him.
Yeah.
Because what did he do to Meerschaert? He shot a right cross straight through his guard, completely lanced him right in the head.
Yeah.
That's going to work on 500-year-old Damian Maia.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant what happened, because what happened was Meerschaert back towards the cage because I think he was worried about the takedown, and Shimaev was hand fighting or parrying with his left hand, and I felt like Meerschaert was distracted by that, where he didn't want Shimaev to grab his hand because he didn't want him to be able to like pull on him, just shoot, maybe do an arm drag and stuff like that. And he was so distracted that it was too late. As soon as he threw that right hand, he distracted with left hand, hit the right hand. Good night. Let's talk about Damian Maia. So the Damian Maia fight is not officially booked. It was rumored. Dana White talked about it. I don't know, a couple shows ago. And then everyone was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like he's scheduled to fight Gerald Meerschaert, and then he's like the first fighter to be booked at 2 fights at the same time in 2 different weight classes. From the sentiment, it seems like a lot of people don't want to see that fight. It has nothing to do with Shimaev. Seems like everybody wants to see him fight. I just think like everyone knows the conclusion, exactly what you said, that like Damian Maia is going to be hurt bad. This is a guy in his 40s. Like nobody, he's one of the good guys. Like nobody wants to see Damian Maia fight. Like
he's arguably the nicest and one of the most respected and beloved guys in the sport. But more importantly, because, hey, that's what the sport does. It chews up bodies and spits them out. It would teach us nothing about either guy. If he just goes in and does exactly what's expected, what have we learned? Like, does it make you feel better about him taking on a top 10 guy next? Does it just, we learn nothing. So Maia gets a middling paycheck and a concussion for what?
Yeah.
I
think Chimaev heading into this fight was like a negative 550 favorite against Gerald Mershad. Mm-hmm. I don't think he would be that big of a favorite against Damian Maia because it is Damian Maia. Still talking about arguably the greatest grappler in the history of UFC, history of MMA, or at least he's in the club, as we say. He's at least in the club. So I don't think he would be that big of a favorite, but it'd be probably pretty close. He'd probably be negative 450 against a ranked UFC fighter, multi-time former title challenger, a guy that still wins against high-level guys. So it seems like neither one of us are interested in that fight. So let's change it up. Let's matchmake real quick what we would do instead, and let's pick a guy at both middleweight and welterweight because he's bouncing back. He doesn't care. He wants to fight in both weight classes.
One thing I'll say that did impress me is that he was able to make the welterweight limit twice in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That tells me he doesn't have like a crazy cut that.
But then he moves up to middleweight and he doesn't look small either. Like he didn't look small.
I mean, I was actually going to comment that he looked maybe a tad bit undersized against Mearshart, who is himself not a Titanic 185er. So, I mean, he'd be smaller than average, especially compared to the guys in the upper reaches of the division. But, I mean, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, we saw Kelvin Gastelum, how well he did at middleweight. We've seen Robert Whittaker, another guy that was undersized. I mean, Robert Whittaker was a champion.
Yeah, Robert Whittaker was, he was a champ, and he's probably the smallest guy in the top 15.
So we're talking about middleweight right now. Let's match make him at middleweight. Who would you like to see him? Like if you were, they say, Ben, you're hired, you're the new matchmaker. Chimaev will fight anybody. You're going to match him with who?
In middleweight, I think he's ready, or not ready, but it would be appropriate to give him more of a step up just because the division is such a vacuum right now. I'd like to see him against somebody who's a big-bodied 185er who can take care of himself in the feet. Give me someone like Uriah Hall. Give me someone like Derek Brunson.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw Derek Brunson get thrown out there. I think it was Sean Bitter threw that name out there. I thought of Marvin Vittori. This is a guy that's been calling for a fight. He wants to fight everybody. He has, to me, I also try to think about the attitude. Like, he has the attitude for it. Like, there would be a lot of fun on Twitter. So that's the fight I would do. And then, obviously, the buzz about that winner would be fantastic.
I love that because I think, I mean, I'm really high on Vittori.
Yeah, Vittori's good.
He's very good. And, I mean, he's kind of very good in a way that is not typical of continental Europe guys, where he's like a physically burly dude, a bit of a grinder, and he's super young. I'd almost feel bad for the UFC kind of like smashing those two cars together this early on, but talk about a fight where we'd learn a lot about one or both guys. Give me that over Damian Maia.
Yeah. Let's go to welterweight. I'll go first this time. I'm going to go Nico Price, the guy we saw today. I just think that'd be fun, wild, kind of similar thing. He's a guy crazy enough to want to fight like that. That's what I would do.
I love that. It would, I mean, there's every possibility that I was just talking about kind of how defensively porous Price has been. He gets lanced right through the face, just the same as Mearshart did. But one question that we need to answer about Khamzat Chimaev at some point is, what's his gas tank look like, especially at 170? The guy's never been past the middle of the second round. He's never been pushed. Price is a guy where if Chimaev doesn't get him out of there early, he gets tired, but he keeps throwing offense and keeps making his opponent work even when he's tired. Like even in the Cerrone fight, after he kind of like went crazy in the beginning and then he kind of geared it down a little bit, he was still outlanding Cerrone the whole time and pushing the action. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that's a fight where Chimaev just hangs on and takes a decision, but we learn something about him.
Yeah. Yeah, Nico Price is not that guy who's like, his engine isn't blown. His engine is smoking on fire, but is still going. And everyone's like, You see that car on the highway, like, oh my God, that guy's car is pretty much on fire, but it's still going. So I want to ask one more question, and I just thought of this while we were doing matchmaking for a second. and we should move on. We have like 11 more fights to do, but other than the main event, like this is what people are going to talk about most. And honestly, like I wouldn't be shocked if Chimaev is what they talk about even more than the main event, as crazy as that sounds. After the president called in, Colby Covington. Kamaru Usman versus Chimaev. I'm not saying that fight needs to be booked. I'm not saying that, but how much like this guy has 3 fights in the UFC. He hasn't beaten anybody even close to a ranking. Like, how much of a favorite is Kamaru Usman versus Chimaev?
Not as big as he should be.
No,
like he probably like if a guy can be like minus 250 and be a good value bet, that's what he would be. I don't even think it'd be that big.
The number I thought of was like negative 175.
Oof.
And I he might have been a bigger favorite against Colby Covington than he would be against. All right, same thing. Israel Adesanya. How much of a favorite?
That's harder to say. Just. Yeah. I think Adesanya would be more of a favorite, whether that's fair or right or not.
See, I don't know. I think Usman might, because we haven't seen Israel Adesanya challenge with wrestling. Like a strong wrestler. Like this would be the first guy who could possibly, obviously I don't know this, but possibly use strictly a wrestling game against. I know Derek Brunson was planning on it until he got utterly destroyed. I don't know. I think it'd be something similar. Maybe negative 200. Maybe, negative 125. I don't think But my whole point is like, this guy hasn't beat anybody, and he wouldn't be a huge underdog. And there's people right now that would take him to win.
And on paper, it makes no sense. But when you watch him fight, there is just a certain energy about him and a certain confidence and smoothness that makes you get hype. I can't justify it, but I can understand it.
Yeah. Is there anybody that had this feeling after beating 3 unranked guys? Like,
no, I was talking about this in the Sherdog Slack during the fights, like before the Mearshart fight happened. When I said, has there ever been a fighter who got more juice out of 2 lower level victories than Phillips and McKee in UFC history? And I'm like, no. I mean, Houston Alexander had to at least knock out Keith Jardine before he was for real.
Yeah, who was ranked. Yeah, who was ranked.
Yeah. Johnny Walker had to knock out Misha Serkinov, who was a top 10 guy.
Yeah. So, Israel Adesanya was extremely hyped, but still not to this level.
And Adesanya, I mean, he'd won a lot more than 2 fights in the UFC before we started talking about him like this.
Yeah. No. I don't know if we are still talking to him like this, and he's the champion of the world.
Well, I mean, I didn't believe in him until after the Brunson fight.
Yeah. Let's move on, because we want to breeze through these other ones a lot quicker. Another big fight: Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann. Johnny Walker won by first round TKO. There's a couple things we got to talk about. We're going to talk about the action. We're going to talk about the thing that I think was the bigger story, and we can't spend too much time on it because this is going to be a long show. Anyways, I apologize. This was a rock'em sock'em robot fight. Ryan Spann dropped Johnny Walker a couple times to the point where Johnny Walker went down. I thought he was finished. Like his coach was screaming, "Finish him!" Because remember, the thing about Ryan Spann is he's gassed himself out. Where he's in his last fight, like they try to control yourself a little bit, and outside not his last fight, a fight he tried to control himself a little bit, and his coach was screaming, "Finish him!" Like, don't do that. Like, finish him. And he was unable to finish him. Johnny Walker, I guess, kind of recovered. Spann kind of like slipped into a double leg, and then Johnny Walker just unleashed elbows and hammer fists and get the stoppage. Despite getting a first round knockout over a guy who is ranked in the UFC rankings, like, I don't think it was a good showing for Johnny Walker. Like, I don't feel better about Johnny Walker. I think I might feel worse.
Oh, absolutely. I feel the same. All I saw was what I already knew Johnny Walker could do, and the things that give me pause anytime he's going to fight a real contender were not solved. He's still wild. He's still defensively porous. And I mean, I have to watch the replay before I say definitively, but he was in a position where he could have gotten himself a DQ loss tonight. Like a guy that gives us that much drama in half of a round.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a real future contender to me.
Yeah. I'm going to pause on that DQ loss because I think we're going to spend some time on that, especially if you saw my Twitter. But I want to ask you this question before I forget. Go back 6 months ago or a year ago with Johnny Walker. If Johnny Walker said, oh, I'm going to leave my team, I'm going to go find a new team, it's going to be a major team, if you had like 30 guesses, would you have ever guessed SBG Ireland would be the team he ended up with? Is there a weirder match than Johnny Walker at going to Dublin to be with SBG Ireland?
I mean, it's weird, but we are talking about a guy who picked up his nickname because, I mean, of course, Johnny Walker is not his real name.
Yeah.
Because he came up in England, you know, and so they decided to name him after the Scots.
But what I mean by that is, like, all their guys are small. Like, they don't have a big...
Okay, that is
that's
weird.
What I mean.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, you know, Tony Ferguson at Team Death Clutch, like, you know, training with, like, Brock Lesnar and Pat Barry. But, no, that is a weird thing. You know, kind of like being the one big guy at Team Alpha Male. It is very strange. I wonder if they train him by, like, having one guy stand on another guy's shoulders and, like...
Yeah, it is a little disturbing when he said, "Oh, I've been training for months at SBG Island." He's like, "Yeah, I still haven't seen Conor McGregor yet." I don't know if you heard that. Like, oh,
yeah,
oh, great, great, I guess, great. That's always good if you're a Conor fan to know that he hasn't been in the gym at all. Let's talk about the thing that we really got to talk about, the TKO. I'm gonna say I thought they were illegal strikes. There was about 30 hammer fists, elbows. I think a lot of them hit to the side of the face, side of the ear, back of the ear. But there was a lot of them I thought was straight to the back of the head. Saif Saud, you could hear extremely loud screaming. Those are the back of the head. He lost his shit. It sounded like afterwards he was yelling at the ref, yelling at Dana White, yelling at everybody who would listen. What do you think? Do you think they were legal or illegal?
You know, I've watched a couple of replays of the actual finishing sequence, and they sure look like those last ones are just right to the back of the head. But a lot of the shot, Walker's back is to you, so you can all you can really do is kind of infer their positions. So I'm gonna have to watch some more replays. But certainly, if I were Saif Saud, I would have been up screaming too.
Yeah. One thing we have, and I tweeted this out. I said we should just allow strikes to the back of the head because. What the hell? No one ever calls it anyways. Though Dan Murgali did stop. What fight? I forget what fight it was. He actually stopped one for the back of the head today. That was
it Bektic versus Jackson?
Yes, it was. It was Bektic versus Jackson. It was the same referee let this one go.
And that was like one shot. And that one I actually thought kind of hit like right behind the ear, which would have been fine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of funny. Yeah.
So I think one of the issues, and I think this one, it's a rule that hasn't been talked about enough. But I think it should be, is they're really like your two major leaders when it comes to referees, or two faces of refereeing, has kind of been John McCarthy and Herb Dean. John McCarthy has gone on record many times saying it's basically that mohawk. You Chuck Liddell mohawk going down. You've hit that mohawk. The problem is, with that definition, it's like it's so... Like, where does the mohawk go? Like, it's such, and you're trying to figure out while at full speed with guys going 100 miles an hour. Oh my God, is that the back of the head? Is that the mohawk? What? Okay, Herb Dean is like even worse than that. Herb Dean's it's basically like this like little strip down. Like
it's a 1-inch strip.
Yeah, that 1-inch strip with like the very bottom of the neck being like all. And I'm like, that might be even worse. Like, is it in that 1-inch strip? And I'm like. Why can't we just say if it's between the back of the ears, it's illegal? Like, how easy would that be? There's his ear. Okay, it's on the back behind his ear. That's illegal.
I don't know what the solution is, but it really does suck because even as much as we make fun of, everybody gets 2 free fence grabs and 2 free eye pokes before anything gets called, shots to the back of the head might be the most inconsistently enforced of any like MMA rule. It's just completely bizarre. Yeah. And it's bizarre to the point that anytime it's called in a way that alters a fight, it feels weird and fight altering.
Yeah.
You're like, it's always like, why did you pick now to like start?
I know that it's something that has to be like, we have to change that rule. I don't remember who else was said, it's basically like the headphones, like you're wearing some pretty good size headphones right now. It's like that, like you have those big size. I don't get why we just be like, behind the ears are illegal. Everything behind the ears. That's what I think would be the easiest one. Something needs to be changed. I'm sure Saif Sayud of Fortis MMA will appeal this one. It's not going to get overturned. It's just
No.
We might have the Mike Rodriguez one get overturned. We might not. This one definitely is not going to get overturned. Before that, we had Mackenzie Dern submit Randa Marcos in the first round by armbar. I want to get this over with because this was a very aggravating. I picked Randa Marcos. I thought she would do a sprawl and ball type game plan and win. I thought that I was feeling pretty good. Like, you don't go to the ground with Mackenzie Dern, you'll win. And then Mackenzie Dern slips, falls to her back, and Randa Marcos jumps on top of her and tries hitting her and gets submitted. Is this like this? Like, I know I can be the king of hyperbole, live in the moment kind of thing, but like this is like one of the worst fight IQs in history. This is a 9-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. 9-time. This is the girl who, like, that's what we've seen. Like, if you avoid her submissions, you can win.
Yep.
And Randa Marcos like jumped right in. Like, what? And then she just became like a submission dummy for her. Eventually getting tapped out. I mean, I want to move on from that. Mackenzie Dern, she did look good. She's 27 years old. What do you think? Like, what do you think the ceiling is for her?
I think the ceiling is some time in the strawweight top 5 and quite possibly a title shot.
Yeah,
I don't
totally agree.
I don't know if she would win a title, but I can definitely see her fighting her way to a title. The funny thing is that the biggest knock on her was her inability to make weight, and after having a baby, all of a sudden it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah. Well, as she get a little older, a little more mature, it could be just simply, I don't know. But yeah, you think like get the baby, she'd definitely move up. And she didn't miss by like quarter of a pound. Like she would miss by 6 pounds.
6 pounds. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mackenzie Dern, I had this conversation with. I have a friend. He has multiple kids, but 2 of his kids are extremely successful in judo. Like they're world renowned, like ranked worldwide. Like his daughter could actually win the Olympics. They're like, that's how good she is. Mm-hmm. So they're both national champions. And I was talking to him about MMA and this and that, and he was just talking and he didn't understand that I said, like, he's like, oh, who do you think he was talking about his son? Like, I think he should be better. I'm like, actually, I think the girl would be better. And why? Because I was explaining to him, like, well, 1, the weight class is a lot more shallow. But 2, like, specialists have done a long way. Like, if Mackenzie Dern doesn't get any stand-up in women's MMA, like, we've seen specialists go really far. Like, say what you want about Ronda Rousey. She was kind of a specialist. And she ended up becoming the biggest women's star in history, was a dominant champion. So Mackenzie Dern, like, if she gets any fighter down to the ground, she could win. I would expect Weili Zhang to be a massive favor against her. I would take Weili Zhang to beat her. But if there is a little window on the ground, she can get that submission. So I don't know what else to say. Like, that's how I feel about her. Like, I don't expect her to be a champion, but you never know. You want to matchmake Mackenzie?
Sure. I mean, I think at this point, Mackenzie Dern is 4-1 in the UFC. None of the women she's beat are absolute world beaters. I mean, Marcos is probably her best win. Her loss was to Amanda Hebus, who, as it turns out, is really, really good. But nonetheless, I think she needs a kind of someone in that lower ranges of the top 10 to the top 15. I believe, I mean, Carla Esparza just barely edged out Marina Rodriguez.
Yeah.
I like either of those women versus Dern, actually, because they offer two different looks. I mean, Esparza is someone who, if she has her way, she's going to take you down.
Yeah.
Like, is she going to try that against Dern?
But,
is she savvy enough to take care of herself?
Yeah.
Then Rodriguez, she had a hard time staying on her feet against Esparza, but Esparza's got a good takedown game.
Yeah.
And
Mackenzie Dern doesn't have a good takedown game.
Yeah. Mackenzie
She's strictly a jiu-jitsu. She's not a wrestler. She's that strictly like. That's what drove me even more crazy about Randa Marcos. Like, she's not this powerful wrestler, which is with Carlos Esparza. I like that matchup just from the does she go overtake them? But she also has the ability where she can do a sprawl and brawl game. Like, she's definitely going to have the advantage. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say definitely, especially at Mackenzie Dern's young age. You make huge. We've talked about this many times. She's at the age where you make huge jumps in improvement, but you would expect her to have the advantage. The name I came up with was Angela Hill, because she's someone who definitely would not want to go to the ground. She's athletic. She's quick. She just main evented UFC, but also we've seen her struggle on the ground. We've seen, last week we saw her much improved takedown defense against Michelle Waterson. That's the fight I would do. I would do Angela Hill.
What about Waterson? Like, what if they didn't want to match someone who's now lost 3 straight, fair or not, against Dern, who's on the way up? Like, what about Waterson?
I'm okay with
versus,
that. Yeah. It's the best women's division. It's one of those ones that's kind of hard to make a bad matchup. The only problem you have is trying to find new matchups. That's usually your problem as strawweight, not trying to find good matchups. And the last fight on the main card, we had Kevin Holland versus Darren Stewart. This was probably the closest fight of the entire card. It was a split decision, which Kevin Holland won. I scored at 29-28 for Kevin Holland. How'd you score?
I'm having to look at the Sherdog play-by-play to see my own score. Yeah, I scored at 29-28 Holland. I gave Holland the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. A lot of people gave Stewart the first round because while Holland definitely had the more volume, the best shot, the best strike, the most significant moment was actually landed by Darren Stewart. I had like an epiphany, I feel like, during this fight, because I've always struggled with Darren Stewart. Like, kind of like grasp. Like, I feel like I do a very well timed, like, kind of grasping people's game. And I've really struggled really recently with Darren Stewart to, like, try to categorize him. And then I kind of feel like this is what Darren Stewart is to me. He's a guy that has very limited skill sets, but he has the skill he has in like the 3, I would say the 3 major areas of MMA: striking, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. Like, he's got a little bit of skill in it, but he gets everything out of it. He's like that, like, I don't know, he has this magic to make like fights tough because of that little limited ability. And then I was like, holy crap, Kevin Holland is the complete opposite. Kevin Holland has all these tools, all these skills, and he has this unique ability to like dilute it so much and just scrape by like he has. Like, it seems like every fight but one. I don't know. I have nothing else to add to this fight. Like, he squeaked it out again. He had just enough to get by.
I completely agree. Holland's fights are often closer than they need to be on paper.
Yeah.
Just it remains to be seen whether he'll be this guy forever, or he's gonna flip a switch at some point and become like a terror. If you're a coach, you definitely would much rather have Kevin Holland than Darren Stewart as your student. But so I don't know, something about Darren Stewart. He has that, like, I feel the same way like about Brian Kelleher. Like, Brian Kelleher somehow finds ways to win with a very limited skill set. That's how Darren Stewart is. Let's move on to the prelims. Flyweight matchup: Jordan Espinoza versus David Dvorak. David Dvorak won a unanimous decision. He looked fantastic.
Yeah,
I thought.
Yeah, it was one of those ones. He was a very slight underdog, and I was like, why? Like, I thought he should have been like, like negative 175 like favorite. He just marched him down. He marched him down with a high guard and just attacked the legs with like brutal calf kicks until Espinoza. I thought Espinoza did a very good job faking that he wasn't hurt. Like, he switched his stances, but he would switch his stance and throw a strike, so it seemed like it was almost a strategy. Like, I gave Espinoza a lot of credit. The problem with, someone tweeted this out, and I really liked it, is it seemed like he was shadow boxing, and he was trying to win by throwing more, but not even landing. Like, he didn't want to get in that range where he could get kicked. So let me try to Caitlin Chikagian it as much as I can, and win this like air battle, and hope that fakes the judge. Like, he was trying to fake the judges out, and luckily the judges didn't fall for it. Anything else you got to add? Like, like, Dvorak looked great. So, I mean, is this someone we should be excited about as a flyweight going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, someone with that well put together of a striking game, because, I mean, I didn't see it as clearly as you did, apparently, because I did slightly favor Espinoza going in. and I expected him to be a crisper boxer. And I don't know whether it was Dvorak's kicks that threw him off, or a combination of that and the fact that he was always the guy coming forward, and Espinoza was having to try to box off his back foot. But Dvorak just seemed ahead the whole time, just got the better of all the exchanges. It didn't look close to being finished at any point unless Espinoza's leg just completely gave out. But it's another one where the winning fighter almost won every minute of every round. It was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, speaking of an eye-opener, I think my eyes are completely open on Mirsad Bektic, and I have completely given up on this guy. He lost by third-round submission to Damian Jackson, who took the fight on 3 days' notice, which Coach Saif Sayud let everyone in the arena know. Mirsad Bektic is a better striker than Damian Jackson. He's a better wrestler than Damian Jackson. But Damian Jackson kept trying to find a guillotine. And Mirsad Bektic basically said, here's my neck, try it a million times until you finally get it. I felt like it's like when you go to a carnival, or you go to not a carnival, arcade. You go to the arcade and you play one of those ones with the claw game, but it's the one that has a sign that says everyone plays till you win. Like that's what I felt like Mirsad Bektic, like, all right, yeah, grab the gift, keep going, and then finally he got it.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Bektic is a better striker, definitely a better wrestler. Even speaking in a strict grappling sense, a better grappler positionally. Like in a points grappling match, probably beats Jackson most of the time.
And layers better athlete, like not even in the same realm of athleticism between the two.
I mean, forgive me while I rap on the Texas guy for a minute. This was Jackson doing Jackson things. I mean, you look at Jackson's record. He's something like 19-3 or something now, 19-3-1, and he's like gone to the final bell 2 or 3 times in his whole career. I don't know if I can remember Damon Jackson winning a round in his entire career. He might be 19-3 and never have won a round, like except for in like one decision win. He is a submission first grappler. He doesn't care if he is losing, the entire fight up until the moment he gets to finish. It's just the way he fights. I don't think it's on purpose. I just think that's the way he's wired. Because every round he got something. First round it was that Kimura. That Kimura would have finished some people. That I was like jumping out of my seat when that happened. The Kimura that like Bektic's arm was like, and then he tried the guillotine in the second round, tried it again in the third round. If that didn't work, Jackson was losing 30-27, if not 30-26. He had lost essentially every other second of that fight, but he did the Damon Jackson thing.
I wonder if I don't give Damon Jackson enough credit. 'Cause like you said, he has a much better record than I remember. And I'm looking through his record, and there's some good wins. Like Nate Gentleman's a good fighter. Jeremy Spoon's a good fighter. But his last 2 losses, they were brutal knockouts. Kevin Aguilar, that one in LFA, was like one punch face plant out. And then Movlid Khabilov with that flying knee in PFL. That said, it just sounds like that feel good story. Like, good for him. He has been in the UFC forever. Good for him.
And I mean, he's one of the Fortis MMA OGs. He's actually from Dallas, and he'd been there kind of even before, like 2 years ago, when people started flocking there after Saif really started making his name. So that's probably part of the reason why Saif was so celebrating when he won.
Yeah, you haven't been in the UFC for a time. You've been fighting on the regional scene. You finally got that call to the PFL, back kind of on the major scene, and you get knocked out in 10 seconds. Yeah, good for him. Before that, we had, I'm going to try my best to say her name how John Anik says it. Maeda Bueno Silva beat
That's pretty good.
Mara Romero Borella by first round submission. Borella looked really good, was piecing her up with the feet, went for a takedown, and sat in a guard and just started getting submitted. This submission and that submission. The commentating team was like, she's got to get out of that guard. She's sitting right there. She's got to give her submission. They're saying it, and they're like, oh, there it is. And she got on barred. I don't know what else to say. She's been off for a long time. Nice for her to get a win. Borella's lost 4 fights in a row. Just low-level UFC
just
females.
Not look. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. Speaking of UFC females, right before that, Jessica Rose Clark versus Sarah Alpar. How do you say her name?
Alpar, yeah.
Yeah, the one I didn't write her name correctly. It was her UFC debut. She was on the Contender Series. Clark looked really fast. I was impressed with her. Her takedown defense was on point, and she looked really good winning the close quarter battles where they're in a clinch. She'd slide an elbow in, uppercut. Looked really, really good. It was just a absolute pillar to post performance. Like, she won pretty much every minute of the fight. The big controversy was our boy Chris Taglioni again. Jessica Rose Clark threw a knee while Sarah Alpar was falling to the ground, and while she was inches before being a down opponent, she got kneed in the face, which absolutely destroyed her nose, blood everywhere. Taglioni stopped the fight, thought it was illegal, kept saying I didn't stop the fight, then found out it was legal, which according to the Las Vegas Commission rules, that's supposed to be the end of the fight. Make a decision. Is it a win? TKO? Nope. He restarted the fight and then just let Alpar get just teed off on.
Pointlessly beat up for another 2 minutes.
Where pretty much almost dude, stop the fight, and then finally ended with a similar knee. I don't know what to say, man. Your boy Chris Taglioni, he is having a rough month.
He is having a rough month, and some people in the comment section of our play-by-play were mad at us for criticizing Taglioni for making the mistake of thinking it was illegal.
On the Sherdog, you're talking about the Sherdog.
Yeah, on the Sherdog play-by-play. And if you're listening to this, don't go there. Don't go to the comment section. The comment section is it is number one bullshit. But the criticism of Taglioni isn't because he made the mistake of thinking it was illegal when it was legal. It was restarting the fight.
Yes.
You can't restart the fight after you've checked the instant replay.
Yeah, because you're screwing that fighter. That fighter had a knockout.
Yeah. If that's the thing, the fight was over. Either it's a TKO, which it is, and that wouldn't have been a big deal, or it's a DQ. And if that was the right call, that wouldn't be a big deal either. It was restarting the fight when Alpar's nose was already on sideways, and basically restarting them in a position where she's sitting on her butt against the fence with another woman standing over her just ready to kick her ass. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I literally said, could you imagine saying to a woman, sit down, and you stand over her, about to knee her in the face? Is there a more cruel thing ever? That's a punishment. Not good. One thing I do want to clarify, Ben said do not go over to the Sherdog comment section. He's talking about the comments on the bottom of the play-by-play. He is not talking about the Sherdog forums. Definitely go over to the Sherdog forums and make comments and post and be there all the time, nonstop, where to get those clicks up. Before that, Derek Minner submitted T.J. Laramie by first-round submission by guillotine. This was Laramie's first fight in the UFC. I was big on T.J. Laramie, and Derek Minner has that Damian Jackson feel to him, where he's also a guy who just hunts for the submission. He will lose a position. He will lose a round, just jumping on guillotines. Shout out to my buddy Dane Fox of Bloody Elbow. He had a great tweet. He's been a guest on Loudmouth before. He had a great tweet. So basically said, T.J. Laramie didn't do his homework. You don't grapple with Derek Minner early. You beat him up on the feet, tire him out, then you grapple. You got to set up your takedowns against Derek Minner. You can't just shoot in on a takedown or you'll get submitted. This is not the debut I expected from T.J. Laramie. I thought it was an easy fight to pick. Boy, was I wrong. What's your thoughts on this fight?
Man, yeah. We had a couple of situations here, and I mean, we'll get to the Bulls and Bears pretty soon, but we had a couple examples of a fighter just giving their opponent, if not the only way, their only route to victory, their best route to victory. Just fighting against your own best interest and self-preservation in the most ridiculous manner possible, and this was definitely one of them. Having said that, I think we might have slept on Minner a little bit. He got completely run over by Grant Dawson, but you know what? Dawson's going to run over a lot of people. He is a serious prospect. And you kind of look at Minner. Okay, he's this guy who took his time getting to the UFC. This guy who got to the UFC with, double-digit losses already. He's going to be one of those dudes. Who he's 2 and gone, and maybe he's not that bad. We'll see.
Yeah, I have that same feeling I felt about Damon Jackson. Like, nice to see a guy that's trugged along in the regional scene so long to get away, and I always, it's nice. It's nice to see that. Man, before that, Randy Costa knocked out Journey Newsom, perfectly landed high kick. Man, it was a same side combo. So basically, what he did was, Costa's a southpaw. It was the first round. He threw a straight cross, like the rear punch, straight cross, and then while he was throwing that, he caused Jeremy Newsom to slip the punch. But while he threw that, he followed up with a high kick. Absolutely beautiful. I love X's and O's. I think people could get that. If you ever listened to my all angle breakdown, which I really hope we bring that back because it's like my favorite show to do. It's like we do 2 hours long talking about a UFC pay-per-view main event. Like, it's very X and O centric. It's very for the hardcores. Like, I love that. And I wrote this combination down as one to remember to look forward more in the future because it was absolutely brilliant. And I love to talk. I'm going to talk to Randy Costa and see if that's something he saw ahead of time in film or it's just something he does a lot. It was beautiful.
And I have the feeling that he's going to say it is because, and this isn't any brilliant observation on my part. Even the UFC booth pointed it out. But the left cross there was the decoy. That thing was going 3/4 speed the whole time. Yeah. And it was meant to make him slip right into the head kick.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, Journey Newsom's not the only guy who does that. A lot of boxers will do that. But, Costa clearly had that set up.
Yeah. If you saw how he threw it too. So if you're throwing the cross, the eye that's on that side, so Costa's left hand would be more lined up with Newsom's right eye. Costa actually over-exaggerated a little bit to the other side, showing like you can slip this, and like kind of force the slip. Kind of like when you see someone do focus mitts. Like you're supposed to, when you do a slipping drill, you're supposed to throw it down the pipe, but everyone kind of over-exaggerates so they can get out of the way. Kind of like the same thing. Costa back-to-back beautiful first round highlight reel knockouts by a local guy in my area, Taunton, Massachusetts, about 25 minutes from me.
So, I mean, I was going to ask this because he seems like a guy like with a certain amount of poise and charisma on the mic that is not common out of a 26-year-old with 7 fights under his belt.
Yeah.
Like usually when you get one of those dudes in the post-fight interview, they're hyperventilating. Sure. You can't understand half of what they say. This dude was slick.
Yeah. So I've Randy Costa, he's one of the guys you don't see a lot on the regional scene. Like he's not at all the regional shows. He's not one of those guys. But I see him occasionally. But when I was in Boston, when he took on Boston Salmon, I interviewed him. He did the open workouts because, being the Boston guy, then the media day, then his post. So I interviewed 3 times in 1 week, and all 3 times I'm like, this guy's got charisma just oozing out of him. So yeah, he's fun. I'm a big fan of Randy Costa. Another guy that came up on the region, not came up on the local scene, but had some fights in the local scene where I live. Andre Ewell beat Irvin Rivera by split decision. I don't like that. I thought this was an easy 30-27 for Ewell. What'd you think?
I was a little late getting to the salt mines tonight, so I came in the middle of the second round here.
Okay.
But I thought Ewell won the second and third rounds for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so I thought he won. I think the first round might have been even his more decisive round. He won all 3. Didn't seem like anybody thought that Irwin Rivera won. Ewell's the guy just kind of split on. Offensively, he's got so many tools. His jab is really good. The way that he works the body is really good. He still has some defensive flaws. He backs straight. He backs straight. Backs up a lot to avoid. He does he needs to bounce his head off the center line, do a little more Dominic Cruz in him. But no, He's done much better in the UFC, and it seems to be improving between every fight. He's been doing. I should say he's done much better in the UFC than I expected him to do. And before that, first fight of the night, Tyson Nam versus Jerome Rivera. Tyson Nam won by second round TKO. Similar to what you just said, I had some technical issues in the first round. It kept I had to keep refreshing it. I missed so much of the first round that I can't really grade it. Second round started off, and Tyson Nam just does what Tyson Nam does. Cracks really hard, and knocked out Jerome Rivera. Called out Joseph Benavidez in the post-fight interview, which was interesting. That was Jerome Rivera's UFC debut. So you said you didn't see that fight, right?
But actually, I circled back around and watched
okay.
that one just during the breaks because we had so many finishes that instead of watching the stupid Hooters commercial for the 13th time in a row, I actually circled back and watched this one. Yeah, it was Tyson Nam doing what Tyson Nam does, but at a more refined level. If you'd asked me a few years ago, this would have been the last guy I expected to be on a 2-fight win streak in the UFC, even in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, he was a good, exciting, just pure kind of Hawaiians just scrap type fighter, he would pop up, he kind of washed out a World Series of fighting, and then went back, and started fighting in Russia and stuff. But I never thought he was this level of fighter. Then he landed in the UFC and lost his first 2 fights to really good guys. I mean, Sergio Pettis and Kai Kara France are both top 10 fighters, but he's looked fantastic. His last 2 opponents have not been Kai Kara France and Sergio Pettis level fighters, so it remains to be seen. But I'm happy for him. Give me a dude who shows up and starts knocking people out. Get these prelims out of the way.
That's right. We need as many flyweights as possible. Let's get to the fun stuff. As we've covered all 14 fights, obviously we breeze through the prelims as quick as we can. Let's do the cut list first. If you guys are not familiar with the cut list, what we do is we make nominees of who we think UFC should get rid of. We try not to focus on the negative too much because while we're saying to cut these people, remember that also leaves openings for other people to reach their dream and get in. The way we do the cut list is if we both agree with them, then we say they are officially on the cut list of the Shillan and Duffy show. If one of us disagrees, then they get to save their job. I'll go first. I got 2 names.
Okay.
The first one I think is probably the most obvious. Mara Romero Barella. She has lost 4 fights in a row in the UFC. I hate cutting women because the divisions are shallow, but I mean you got to have some kind of bar, and she's lost 4 in a row. So, do you agree with me?
I completely agree. She's lost 4 in a row, and more importantly to me, has not offered much of anything during those 4 fights to even give a glimmer of hope.
Yeah. And the other one might surprise you a little bit, but I'm just done with this fighter. He's lost 3 in a row. I'm saying Mirsad Bektic. I think it's time to cut him. Let him go to Bellator. Let him go somewhere else.
You know what? I'm with you. I'm with you. Make room because he's in a division that is not hurting for people to take up roster space. Someone will move in. He lost to Emmett and Ige. Those are 2 really good guys, and the Ige fight was super close. But Damon Jackson, who often fights at lightweight on 3 days' notice, came in and did basically what you knew was the only way he was going to beat you. Bellator time.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so so you have any other people for the cut list?
No, I was only going to offer up Barella. I hadn't even really thought of Bektic, but I'm with you on that one.
All right, so we're going to do the Bulls and the Bears right now. The Bulls and Bears, if you're not familiar with that, it is a stock market reference when the stock market is going good or a stock is going good. It is a bull market. When it's going bad, it is a bear market. So we do it kind of like hockey style. We can pick up to 3 people as your kind of like stars and your busts. I'm going to go first on the Bears, and you'll know why in a second because I just ended with Mirsad Bektic. I'm going to start the Bears with Mirsad Bektic. His stock is clearly going down. This is a guy that not that long ago was looked as a possible title challenger one day, possible title champion, and now he's losing. I know you like Damon Jackson. He's got a very good record, much better than I thought. He still took the fight on 3 days' notice, and I don't think you view Damon Jackson as a title challenger one day. To fall the way Mirsad Bektic has, I mean, his stock can't be any lower than it is right now. My second one, and this is kind of a pair. Chris Taglioni has made the list 2 weeks in a row. He's made another terrible. I mean, the funny thing about Chris Taglioni, like 4 weeks ago, he was on my Bulls list, and now for the second week in a row, he's on my Bears list. But I'm going to put like 2 A and B, because my other one is Sarah Alpar's wedding photos. She's getting married in 3 weeks, and
that was literally going to be on my list. That's so funny.
And she's got a broken nose. I feel bad for her. Like, oh, that's terrible. Like, that's like, I made a joke, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, this poor girl. Like, it's her wedding.
Yep.
She's probably been planning it for a year, or just,
I have actually interviewed her for a feature for the site before. She's super nice, super down to earth, and while I don't claim that like we're friends and I know her like that, she strikes me as the type of person who's just going to take those photos, like jacked up nose and black and blue and all, and just, say, hey, this is how it is. This is what happens when you marry a fighter. She strikes me as that type.
So there you go. And guys, in 3 weeks from now, I'll have a different host because Ben will be at Sarah's wedding. Apparently, he's in the wedding party and everything.
Yeah.
So Ben is marrying Sarah Alpar. Is that what we got from that? All right.
If you say that too loud, I'm going to show up with a black eye too. My wife's sitting right here.
And my number one bear it's pretty obvious. It's Tyron Woodley. I mean, the guy we talked about, he's lost 15 fights in a row. We're talking about a guy who not that long ago was the champion of the world, and now we're saying he needs to retire and that he is completely shot. Tyron Woodley is the number one bear for the night. Who are your bears?
Okay. Bear number one, being the least severe, is Woodley. I mean, because on the one hand, he just went and did exactly what was expected. This is what most people thought the fight was going to look like. So it's hard for me to drop his stock too much in that regard. But we spent the first 20 minutes of this show just talking about how there's really no good way forward for him if he wants to keep fighting. So, I mean, that's going to be number one. Number two is going to be Mara Romero Barella. And really, Mara Romero Barella as just one of several people who handed their foe really their best route to victory. But just the way she sat there in Mayra Bueno Silva's full guard as she was locking on a triangle and just sort of kept calmly just hitting her with like little pity pat hammer fists about every 5 seconds. I mean, and the announcers were all but screaming at her. Everybody that I knew was like screaming at her, get up, get up. It was almost the opposite of the Dern fight, where Dern just put on this complete clinic. It was just like watching the sun come up. It was just as predictable and unavoidable as the sunrise. God, so stupid.
When you say that, you're talking about like everybody was screaming. I just thought of like Saif Sayud in the back, cornering Fortismate, looking up at the camera and just like looking at the TV and screaming at her anyways, because that's what he does.
Yeah, that's safe, man. That's safe. And then number one for me has got to be Randa Marcos.
Yeah.
I mean, if you held a gun to my head and said, "Let win this fight the easiest way possible," I couldn't come up with anything better than jump into her guard 30 seconds into the fight when she is bone dry, she is not tired, and she is not rocked. Like it. I mean, I'm with you on the hyperbole. It's one of the biggest mental lapses I've ever seen in high level MMA. And I mean, jokes aside, this was high level MMA. Randa Marcos is not a bad fighter.
No, she's not. She's not.
But
great,
the funny thing about her,
bad.
and the funny thing about her is, I mean, she had been alternating wins and losses for basically her whole career with like one draw put in the middle. This will be the first time in her career she's lost 2 in a row and could not possibly have deserved it any harder. I don't know if she could have beat Dern, but I know that she made the decision that made it basically impossible.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen it. So she is a grappler by nature, but she does have some stand-up skills. She's stopped takedowns. Like she had, could she do that for 15 minutes straight? I don't know, but she had the ability, and there's no way possible that was their team's game plan. And if it was, then their entire team should be added to this because, I mean, the only person that could have had a worse game plan would have been if Randy Couture, when he fought James Toney, was let's stand up and slung it out in in the pocket this, that was terrible. All right, let's move on to the Bulls. I'll let you go first this time. So the Bulls, guys, this is where people whose stock are obviously rising.
I've got two Bulls. One, Khamzat Chimaev. When you walk in to a fight as a minus 300 favorite, you need to do quite a bit to raise your stock. He did it. He completely destroyed a good, solid UFC roster guy at middleweight. Mearshart isn't a top 10 or top 15 guy, but he's a guy who I believe up until this fight had a winning record in the UFC. He's not a dummy, not generally an easy out, and just completely lamped him. So yeah, I mean, the hype train rolls on, and the guy now has a real live UFC win. Stock up. Gotta be David Dvorak. Again, I walked in expecting him to lose, or if he won, I didn't expect him to win that way by just crisply outstriking Jordan Espinoza for 3 rounds, but that's exactly what he did. They're my Bulls.
All right. Yeah, that's some good ones. Those are some really good ones. I had the longest list in history as I write them down as I go, and then I have to when I get one that I think should be in, I write it down, and then when I get to 3 and I had to add a fourth one, I got to try to eliminate one. I had the longest list in history. They just kept adding people. My number 3 is Paulo Costa, back-to-back highlight reel KOs. He's really young, he's really green, but he's got some potential for growth. And I'm from New England, so I got to give my New Englander a little love. My number 2, MMA Fighting's Damian Martin. I'm giving him. He's on my Bulls list because when the UFC commentary team spends 2 minutes of the broadcast talking about you, and then you get a tweet afterwards. Good night for my man Damian Martin. Give that guy a follow. He's been on the show every time. He's actually one of the big names in MMA media. Who's a really great dude. But number 1, I what else are you gonna say? It's Chimaev. You said everything. We literally were talking about the odds against the champion when he just beat Gerald Mearshart. So Chimaev, he wins the night 3 times, and 3 times he's the talk of the night. Let's get to it. Last question. What is your grade overall for the card?
I'm going to give this one a B+. I thought the thing was a whole lot of fun. The main event was a bit of a letdown, not because of who won or whatever, anyone said afterwards, just because it looked so predictable. Within the first 90 seconds, it was Woodley's not going to pull the trigger, so I know what this fight's going to look like. And it's tough to give a card an A when the main event is ho-hum, but the rest of it had some fantastic finishes, had plenty of scream at the TV moments, and learned quite a bit about a couple of fighters.
Yeah, so I'm actually going an A. I almost heading into the main event, I said if we can get an all-out war, I'm going to give it an A+, which I've never given yet. The reason why is, like you said, we've had so much. We had brilliant walk-off knockouts. We had submissions. We had upsets. We had controversial moments. And honestly, as much as I pitter-patter on the political stuff, and I took this high ground. I love all that drama. Who am I fooling? If you listen to the show, I love all that post-fight drama and Kobe's gimmick and all that. So I give it an A, not an A+, but overall, I think if you watched it, 14 fights is usually always oh man, this is gonna be a long night, but it was a lot of fun. So I give it an A, guys. Normally, this is when I ask Ben for his prediction on the main event. UFC 253 is this week, which means the roundtable is back with, of course, the great host, Mr. Benjamin Duffy himself. So we will not be taking a prediction, as both of us will be on the show making our predictions with a special guest, by the way, which we will not reveal because it's a big one. Ben, what else should we be looking for? I mean, UFC 253 is a big one.
It is a big one. Exciting card to talk about. Exciting card to see. I mean, even outside of obviously the massive grudge match at the top, man, Reyes versus Blachowicz for the light heavyweight, belt, like, because I've gone back and forth on that fight a lot. Like I've known how I felt about Adesanya versus Costa since it was announced. Reyes versus Blachowicz, I cannot like settle down on. So really excited to dig more into that one, both on my own looking at tape and then, with you this coming week.
There you have it, guys. Obviously, Loudmouth here. We're going to have a lot of shows. We'll have a breakdown show. We'll have the Sherdog Radio Network, a bunch of stuff. But also head over to Sherdog. You'll have your, all the great coverage. We'll have play-by-play going on. We'll have scoring. The week of, we'll have interviews, press conferences. What else we're going to have? Tom Feely would do the incredible breakdown. Jay Petrie has his prime picks. All that great stuff. So make sure you head over to Sherdog.com to get all your coverage. And, guys, we'll be back soon for the Sherdog Radio Network roundtable for UFC 253. See you guys then.